You're very welcome back. And in this video, I'm going to talk about something that may raise eyebrows, may not for some. It's about the leadership problem nobody talks about. It's something I faced in not just the Paralympic rifle shooting, but also in roles that I've taken up over the years in information technology management. Think about this one. You may be right, but you're wrong for the environment. That's that's probably more true than people would actually admit. So let me talk a little bit more about what I mean. Most leadership is content's all about, the characteristics, traits. If you Google it, you'll get a list of all leaders are this A, B, C, D, and E, and I'm sure lads and women going to interviews and they know exactly what they need to push. I actually haven't been that person, not for a long, long time. I did in the early, from probably 22 to 24 years old. And after that, I realized something, and it's something that's unavoidable, by the way. I may be right, but the environments I was in was wrong. And that's where conflict internally starts, and that's where you can't possibly perform at your best. You can endure, you can survive, you can't blossom, you can't grow. Similarly in this sport, when I joined, I started out rifle shooting, Paralympic rifle shooting, as a sort of a try before you buy. I was looking for a hobby, and what I found was a passion. And it was when I went to the first day to the coach, to be coached. I remember saying to the coach that was there, I don't know whether this is for me or not. And most people would have a whole load of thoughts straight away going, oh, the wheelchair, oh, disabilities, all that sort of stuff. I was actually going, is it a fit? Because I've long since given up the thing of I'll endure, because you've only got whatever 40 odd years working. Why not spend most of them enjoying working at what you're working at? I haven't changed my mind since ending up in the wheelchair. I pretty much think if I was to put up with anything for one day, would I want it to be something good or something that annoyed me, for example? Something that made me happy, something that made me annoyed. And I prefer to be happy. So I look at these things a little bit more different now. Not a hell of a lot, by the way, just a little bit. And probably my patience for enduring things that don't actually bring something to my life. They don't appear on they don't stay for long. They may appear on the horizon. I experience them and I leave them. So why does this matter? Well, first of all, this isn't about my traits, but it is a belief I have, and I think it carries water, or holds water. But we'll see what your thoughts are on it. It's um, it's what happens in a leader's mind when the plan breaks. So there's the thing. Everyone goes in day one going, oh, I really want to excel in here. I really want to do this, that, and the other. I want to, literally, people go for leadership roles for loads of reasons. There's status, there's money, there's a whole load of things. But what happens when things go wrong? Because it's like a dating situation, I think, when people go into these situations. Nobody on day one really wants to think the worst of the other person at the interview, for example. We're all trying to be friends and pally and get on and stuff. But that sort of honeymoon period ends when you get your feet under the table, and that job becomes a burden, something you hate on a Sunday afternoon because you know Monday morning is coming. Um, and it's got to do with what happens when pressure comes on. And if you're not the type of person who sees alignment in what you're doing at the beginning, it doesn't get better when the pressure comes on. And I mean alignment, and that's internal alignment, not just I have certain skills, I've managed X amount of budget, P&Ls, whatever it is. That's pretty much irrelevant when things go wrong, because they're the basics. How you deal with them isn't the basics. It is to you, by the way, whether you like to believe it or not. We don't suddenly become angry. I've heard people say, oh, this place frustrates the hell out. Well, no, well, actually, that's a sign that there's misalignment to start with. That's why shooting for me is really as close to natural for me. It's like running water. I enjoy every aspect of it. I enjoy the good shots. I enjoy the bad shots. I don't try to repeat the bad shots, by the way. But I'm on a constant improvement. plan if you want. Every shot can have an improvement. Every result can have an improvement. So this sport is very, very much aligned with me, and that's why I'm still at it and still, I suppose, focus so much on improvement. Um, in situations you'll find leaders go in, you've probably seen this as much as I have. CEO comes into a new company, he's come from a company somewhere and he brought revenue from this to this, he increased shareholder whatever from this to this, managing whatever sort of budgets, all that good stuff, comes into a new environment and doesn't succeed. That is not actually their fault particularly. What they've tried to do is come in and they've tried to adapt. Shooting would be very similar in that respect. Everyone can shoot, but I don't believe anyone can shoot. Um, what I would say is, if you want to excel at it, there's a hell of a lot more involved than just shooting. The result is what we call it. It's a historical reference on what you're doing. So the training you're doing now reflects in the future output, but there's a hell of a lot of work goes in there. But if you weren't any good at this sport, sorry, I reframe that because very good is pretty relevant. If you weren't happy with the results you're getting in the sport, if you were to decide in the morning, I'm going to change that and put a plan in place to work at it, at least you'd be able to say, I started at this level, I did a plan, did a work of X amount in this time, and this was the output. I'm getting better or I'm not. But what's even worse is when someone, for example, says they, for example, and it wouldn't be unusual, people would, oh, Paralympic rifle shooting, of course, want into it. Oh, yeah, yeah, no, and how many hours a week are you doing? And I think that's a silly question because I can do twice as many hours and be as half as effective. What I'm trying to get to is everybody wants to, you come into the Paralympic shooting, for example, everyone wants to win gold. That would be my impression anyway. I'm not in it because I want to be a hand clapper. That's what I'll call it. I don't want to be a hand clapper. I want to be the guy they're clapping the hands at, if you know what I mean. But I'm not delusional about what work needs to be put in and the quality of work. And when I've heard people say, you know, I do about 40 hours a week, and I mean, it's not a boast in any way, shape, or form. It's a quantity of work. That's all I'm saying. That's how many hours. But the hours are not 9 to 5, for example. They are 40 block hours, and the work that goes into them is defined within that. Similarly, when you go into a business, for example, somebody who wants to be the CEO, I know the lower to middle management is definitely one of these places where this happens. We all want to be the manager, and then you get there and you realize there's a hell of a lot of stuff in there that's not as much fun as you thought it'd be. But if it's aligned to you, you succeed, and if it's not, it's probably a stifling area. If you push people to adapt too much, they'll break internally. The best thing you ever did for me is day one, not fool yourself. I've actually looked at it as a blessing in certain places when I've gone for roles and within interviews I'd have gone, actually, I'm going to just stop the interview because this is not for me, because I'm not trying to cod myself. I mean, the money might be great, but what will that do for you when you're literally tearing the hair out of your head on a Friday afternoon because the whole thing has gone awry and you realize this isn't what you signed up. There's a phrase. This isn't what I signed up for. It is, yeah, but you probably might have been codding yourself. Um, I do think that leadership is natural. And I do believe, by the way, people can be natural born leaders. That's a thing I do believe. And I believe also the reason they don't flourish is because they never get opportunity to be in an environment where it works. I rode for a rowing club in my 20s. I have friends still around, and I absolutely am fascinated with rowing. It's one of the most interesting sports you'll ever come across for loads of reasons. I remember saying to someone once, you know, I believe the best rowers in the world are ones who have never got the opportunity. And that for me is I believe that in loads of ways. I believe opportunity has to align with the person so that their leadership within that environment gets to flourish. And if they never get that environment, they'll never flourish. The greatest athletes, if they're never given the opportunity, will they ever be the greatest athletes? So the way I look at all this is it's about alignment, internal alignment. I'm aligned my core values within myself. So I have a compass, I call it, and it points a certain direction. And the more I follow that compass and go through life and only sign up to things that are aligned with that compass. Whether it used to be sailing, I'd still love to be sailing, I just can't. Sailing was very much aligned with it. Shooting is aligned with it. IT, but only certain roles within IT, by the way. I've worked within the banking system, it killed me. I worked as a contractor, hate the word consultant, but nonetheless, that's what they were putting us in as. I really struggled because I was used to pretty much getting work done. Greenfield sites to 500 users in 18 months. It was done. Why? Because it had to be, because that was what it took. That was very much aligned with me as a person. And not the hectic pace, by the way, but the fact that the plans behind it, planning is something I do really well, and observing things as well. So it was a really good environment for me with the banking system, perhaps, and other financial institutions. I couldn't flourish in them for sure because they were never structured to work at the pace that I had become experienced to. And my natural alignment was with certain organizations. And the more I became aware of the ones that were suitable and cut them out, the better. Otherwise, you're forced to adapt, and adaptation creates a massive internal turmoil, similar to shooting. If you're not happy to do the quality of work that's necessary in shooting, for example, uh, ability rather than talent is where I come from. You can measure ability. Talent is one of those mythical things, and we all have a talent in some sort. But ability will start you off at a certain place, and I think the grind after that gets you the rest of the way. Again, find the alignment because I'm a leader in my sport. I'm a leader of my program. I've an athlete-led program, so I'm the one that's guiding it. It's very much aligned in where I want to go and how I want to do things. The numbers back it up. Everything is aligned here. It's not something mythical, something out of order even. And that's what I feel in a lot of leadership roles in whatever place they are. If they're not naturally aligned with you, you'll actually see, for example, organizations take massive hits because the person at the helm. I'm going to float two different ideas. One is that they deluded themselves, and the other is the people who were hiring them deluded themselves, because it's one or the other. Because if it's perfectly aligned, it gets done. I've never seen it not get done when everything is aligned. It's usually when someone is brought in because they're a rock. There's a thing. Someone gets brought into a team as a rock star because they worked in ABC company and they're a big company and all that good stuff. And here's the reality. They come into an environment that wasn't set up like ABC, and they don't actually succeed anymore. Point in fact, you look at we look at American sports, for example. They have a different system than you would have in Ireland here, for example. We'll say that people are drafted from college, yeah? American football I'm talking about, and in basketball, I believe, as well. So here's the thing. They're a rock star in college. They go to the, what you call it, they go to the big game, suddenly they're no longer a rock star. What is it? And it very well may be things were set up around them in the college to help them succeed. By that I mean they're the guy the coach has as the structural leader within the team. And everything is set up so that that person gets the opportunity to show who they are. And they are great, by the way. That's not the problem here. It's when they go to the new environment, because things aren't set up around them the same way, they may not be shining. Doesn't mean that they can't, because their internal values, if you want, or their compass. It may just need to be realigned slightly, and then they start to become the rock star again. So it's similar in business and similar in sports. Um, I've had one of the experiences I've had. I think 1 minute and 42, and I got the job. It was probably the largest role I'd ever had, with the most responsibility, and it was something that was very well aligned. And it happened because it was right. Now, the other thing was I had worked in a banking environment for a short period of time, and nothing could have been more polar to what I was aligned with. For example, 14 decision makers sitting in a room, you're sitting there, and they've had 8 meetings. I was brought in at probably eight weeks into their project, and they're literally just meeting to meet. That was something I would have always been too busy to meet, but I could be meeting people to do something. Um, the bank wasn't naturally aligned to me. It just wasn't. It wasn't somewhere that I was ever going to flourish, even though I was offered a full-time role in it. I made the decision not to, because yes, I had the skill set they were looking for, but no, they didn't have the environment that it would be able to survive in without a consequence to me. Again, the happiness thing, and I don't mean you have to be happy 24/7. There'd be something slightly wrong if that was the case. However, just because the role, and it would have been, bank had a prestigious role, by the way, and the money was very good. It wasn't that issue. It was the fact that I had spotted in a very short space of time this place was not going to be aligned for me, and I would never be the best that I could be in a role. I took the other role, and it flourished without a doubt. So what I would say is, before you make, before you let anybody into the real decision in the business or the team apply the test, how close to alignment are they? Get them not to fool themselves and you don't fool yourself. If you're sitting on one side of the table going, oh, I can change, if this person, because they have that skill set already, I could do this, this, and this, and this with them. You could, and it could work out, or it might not. And on the other side, when you're sitting into a role like the sport, when I saw this sport, I didn't fool myself. I'm the type of person anyway, does a lot of deep research on things in a very short space of time. I looked at the sport, I asked how many hours it would take. I saw where I was at that time, benchmarked, and went, do I think that that's possible? And once I realized it was, I put a plan in place to test it for a period of time and then realized, yes, it would work. But I didn't cod myself. And I think that's the big thing. So if there was, if there was one thing, I would say, don't cod yourself. Make sure that the role you are is aligned with you. And what I mean by alignment, are you happy coming out of it? That's the reality. Because I am never unhappy coming out of training. I am never unhappy with this sport that I'm in. I was never unhappy in the roles that I flourished. And that's because they were aligned. Thank you.